Thank you, Director Ranga, for the introduction and housekeeping rules. And now we would like to also invite again Director Ranga to raise a toast and to also welcome our guests from overseas. Back to you, Ranga.
President Lewis, it's my pleasure today to raise a toast to the Rotary Club of Hanover, Germany. The Rotary Club of Hanover was founded in 1932. As the first Rotary Club in the capital of Lower Saxony, Germany, the club currently has 130 members. We are pleased this evening to have Rotarian Dr. John Jackish. Dr. John Jackish would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. First of all,
you're muted.
No, I'm not.
Okay, okay.
Okay, good. I hope everybody can hear me. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's my great pleasure to attend actually my first Rotary meeting here in Singapore, although I have to confess that I have been living in this fantastic city since 3 years now. For different reasons beyond my control, I never made it to one of the meetings here, mostly because I rarely spend time here in Singapore, as I think many people do. And so I'm very, very pleased to be here. I send my regards, of course, also on behalf of the Rotary Club of Hanover, and will be very excited to enjoy my first meeting here as a guest of the Rotary Club of Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Fellow Rotarians, please join me in a toast to the Rotary Club of Hanover, coupled with a toast to Rotary International.
Rotary Club of Hanover.
Hanover and Rotary International.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Director Ranga. And we welcome our guests from Germany, Hanover, and we hope that more of you will come over when COVID gets more settled. And you can always join us through Zoom, and hopefully when it's physical, you'll be around. Thank you very much again. And then we would like to now do some announcements. We will have inductions of 2 new members. So the induction of 2 members will call upon Mr. Anshol and Ms. Imane. Just a short introduction. Fellow Rotarians, it is my privilege and pleasure today to welcome into our membership Mr. Anshol and Ms. Imane Jamal Adin, who were proposed for membership by Rotarian Suresh Kirti and Rotarian Francesco De Liva, respectively. The proposals have been reviewed in accordance with the Constitution and bylaws of the club. Ansh and Imane, as you would like to be known in the club, we now proceed to admit you into membership in the Rotary Club of Singapore. You have been chosen for membership in this club because your fellow members believe in you to be a leader in your field and have qualities which will allow you to carry out the work of a Rotarian. In electing you to membership, we are doing more than taking you into our fellowship. We are making you a trustee with us of Rotary's ideals. Knowing you to be a Rotarian, the world will henceforth judge Rotary by your conduct. Membership in Rotary is an honor and privilege, and every privilege has its corresponding obligations. You have agreed to accept the responsibilities attached to your membership in this club and to obey this club's constitution and bylaws. One of the special obligations of membership is regular attendance at the weekly meetings and the monthly service committee meetings and participation in club projects and activities. It is the primary method of fulfilling the principles of service and fellowship, and also a way by which you represent your vocations. Ansh and Imane, the ideal of Rotary is service. Our principal motto is service above self, and the object of this club and all Rotary clubs is to encourage and foster this ideal as a basis of worthy enterprise. You are to share in these efforts. For the rest of this Rotary year, I would be pleased if you would serve on the following service committees. For Anj, you will be assigned to Youth Service Committee, and your mentor is past President Dinesh Sharma, the immediate past President. You are privileged. And for Imane, you will be assigned to the Vocational Service Committee, and your mentor is past President Berlita Tiro. You are also privileged. And your mentors will guide your assimilation through the service committee. Your classifications are as follows. For Anj, your classification is data analytics banking, and for Imane, customer relationship management, IT services. As you represent a classification, it is your duty to tell us about your vocations and to bring the ideals of Rotary to your business and professions. And now, by the power vested in me as president of the Rotary Club of Singapore, I declare you to be an active member of this Rotary Club. I will present you with a Rotary emblem and a packet of Rotary literature at a later date. I especially commend to your attention the object of Rotary and the four-way test, which form the criteria for Rotarians in their daily life. I also suggest that as and when you travel, you avail yourself of the extraordinary opportunity you will have to attend Rotary meetings and meet Rotarians throughout the world. This is another very rewarding benefit of your membership. Fellow Rotarians, I'm happy to present to you Rotarians Anj and Imane, our newest members. Let us unmute and welcome them to the oldest Rotary Club in the district, 3310, the Rotary Club of Singapore. Welcome to Rotary.
Congratulations, welcome.
And now invite Anj to address us for a few minutes, followed by Imane. Anj, please. Okay, and if you're not there, then
He's there.
Imane to perhaps address us first.
Thank you, President Louis and everyone else for your welcome. Very happy to be here. The first time I joined you was to present about the female leadership and how we navigate diversity and inclusion. And the welcome, the conversation, questions were so outstanding that after that I went to Francesco and said, I would love to join. The impression was really, really great. I'm so happy to join you. I would love to continue working with you, contributing to the society and to the ecosystem. My husband of 17 years is with me here, and he's happy to support his female leader wife. Definitely we want to work together and contribute to Rotary moving forward. So thank you very much for the membership, and yes, happy to be in the vocational service, and so glad to have PP Perlita as my mentor. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Imane and Khalid.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Hello.
Anj, yes.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thanks a lot, President Lim, for giving me a good privilege to joining this institution. And apart from that, I'm very thankful to Suresh Kirti and our past President Dinesh Sharma and Bernard and Jessica for making this operation very smoothly. And I'm very glad to be a part of this prestigious institution. And since I also been a part of an NGO, so I'm looking forward to working with you all to contribute to the society to the very best. And yeah, and thanks for giving me such a privilege for this. Thank you, President Lim.
Welcome.
Thank you, and with this induction of 2 new members, I'm sure we have guests here who are prospective members and who are looking forward to joining us. And I would like to ask our Rotarian Suresh Kirti, one of the key drivers of our enhanced membership, to welcome our guest, please.
We have with us Mohan Das Chugani, and Vinish Natali. I think this is only 2 who have joined, and Matthias Boga, who also have been attending several of our meetings. I welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rotarian Suresh. You have been instrumental in bringing many members. So we will do this frequently on a weekly basis when we have guests attending. I'm sure they see your familiar face and they feel very homely. Thank you. And we now move to the next segment of our evening. And for this, I would like to ask Dr. Ganesh Ramalingam to introduce our speakers for this evening. Dr. Ganesh, please.
A very good evening to everyone. Thank you, President, for the kind introduction, and a very good evening to all. There's so many distinguished guests here today. I'm really in awe of all your achievements after I learned some of them. And thank you thank you, Bernie, for this opportunity to present. In general, this presentation is done by people who are very close to the speakers. But this is the first time I'm meeting them, and I'm very eager and very keen to meet them, even on a longer basis in terms of collaboration. Essentially, today, we're going to hear about the Singapore Children's Society. And the topic of today will be championing the needs of children, youth, and families in Singapore. The synopsis of today's event will be, since its establishment in 1952, the Singapore Children's Society has continuously adapted its services to meet the changing needs of beneficiaries, while staying true to its mission of bringing relief and happiness to children in need. However, the work is far from complete. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated pressures on families during a period when children and youth need even more support and guidance to address their fears, their stresses, and anxieties. This talk will highlight some of the emerging threats and challenges to the well-being of children, youth, and families in Singapore, and how Children's Society themselves has adapted to ensure that it would be in a good position to address these threats and challenges. A little bit about the Singapore Children's Society. The Singapore Children's Society protects and nurtures children and youth of all races and religions. In 2020, last year, 34,654 children, youth, and families benefited from its services. The Children's Society operates 12 service centers island-wide, offering services in 4 categories of vulnerable children and youth, children and youth services, family services, and finally, research and advocacy. Before I introduce my very, very distinguished and very, very honorable speakers, I would like to make a short remark about the fact that our club honorary member, past President Rotarian Koh Chun Hui, who is present today, was the Singapore Children's Society president and is the Singapore Children's Society president and been so for more than 20 years. So I'm not sure whether he's going to say something after this, but it's a very proud thing to announce that. And we move on to our speakers. Our first speaker will be the CEO of the Singapore Children's Society, Ms. Boon Min. She was appointed the CEO of Singapore Children's Society on the 1st of May, 2020. She first joined the Society as its Deputy Director of Strategic Planning in September 2013. Prior to that, she spent 9 years in consulting with PwC Economics in London and the PwC Transaction Services Group in Singapore. So I would like to introduce her first before I introduce my second speaker, who is Ms. Tan Bee Joo, who is the Group Lead of Family Services. Ms. Tan joined Singapore Children's Society in 1998 after graduating from NUS with a degree in social work. She spent 14 years in children and youth services before moving on to work with vulnerable families, leading Yishun Family Service Center since 2016. So maybe I can introduce the CEO of the Singapore Children's Society. It's my greatest honor to introduce Ms. Boon Min to give us a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh.
Thank
I
you.
hope you can hear me well.
Yes, very well.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Is this the time when I start my talk? Would you like me to start now? Cool, thank you. President Louis Lim, Rotarians, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Boon Min, the CEO of Singapore Children's Society. Thank you for inviting us to your weekly meeting this evening. I'm joined by my colleague, Bee Joo, who leads our Family Services Group in Children's Society. We are very honored and privileged to be given the opportunity this evening to speak about Singapore Children's Society's journey in championing the needs of children, youth, and families in Singapore. I'm going to share my screen now, so if you would just hang on for a minute. So given the Rotary Club's long history of active involvement in community services, I believe this topic of the needs of children, youth, and families in Singapore will not be entirely new to the Rotarian members present this evening. But through our talk, I hope that we can provide some new perspectives and also share with you some of the new directions and initiatives that Children's Society will be undertaking so that we can be in a better position to support the needs of those we serve. Let me start by providing a brief overview of Children's Society. Singapore Children's Society was established in 1952 by a group of volunteers who were concerned about the health of children in Singapore, many of whom were poorly nourished. As you will know, 1952 was right after the period of World War II. So malnutrition and undernourishment of children was a key priority at that time. In 1956, the first center of Singapore Children's Society was established in the form of a convalescent home in children in Changi. The Children's Society today is of course very different, but our work remains that of protecting and nurturing children and youth of all races and religion. Our mission is to bring relief and happiness to children in need. Bringing relief is a very important part of our work because some of the children we work with bring with them a history of abuse and neglect. Our role is therefore to protect them and to help them recover from their traumatic experiences. Bringing happiness is our way of nurturing and guiding the children and youth to develop into positive, healthy young adults. And our vision is to be a leading edge organization in promoting the well-being of the child. So today we are 69 years old. I believe in this slide you will see a very familiar face. This is Mr. Koh Chun Hui, the chairman of Singapore Children's Society. So he has been a chairman since 1978. So that means that he has been chairman for 43 years already. Yes, and our patron-in-chief is President Halimah Yaakob. And since 1952, of course, our services and programs have evolved quite a lot. So starting from one convalescent home in 1956, we now have 12 service centers spread across Singapore. We are governed by the board. So this is where Mr. Koh is the chairman, and the board is also supported by 5 standing committees, as well as other committees such as the Investment Committee, Audit and Risk Committee, as well as the newly set up Technology Advisory Committee that allows us to bring together many volunteers, many experts from different fields who volunteer and serve with us on a regular basis. This next slide that I'm showing here illustrates the locations of our 12 service centers. In addition to the service centers, we also have some departments and some units supporting the work of our group. So including the corporate office, including the research unit and the advocacy unit, which I will be describing in more details later on. In 2020, we served 34,654 beneficiaries in Singapore across the various centers. Our total expenditure was around over 70% of our expenditure is manpower related, as we have a total staff strength of over 200, the majority of whom are social workers, counselors, and caseworkers who interact directly with our beneficiaries. Where do we get our funding from? So we are largely self-funded because we hold regular fundraising events, campaigns and donation drives to raise funds through donations. Because we have long established a fundraising department of our own, so we do not tap on the funds raised by community chest. And part of our income also come from the government, as we are also appointed service providers of some of the programs that are being managed by the government. There is a long list of awards here, but I will not go through every single one of them. I think I just want to highlight that in the past few years, we have been awarded a Charity Transparency Award between 2016 and 2019. And before the award took a hiatus in 2020. So corporate governance is an area that is particularly important to us. I think it's important for all organizations, but even more so for charities, because the trust of our stakeholders is extremely important to our work. Syrian Society provide a wide spectrum of services for children, youth, and families. Apart from the rehabilitative work where we help to protect and to help children who have suffered adverse experiences recover, we also provide developmental and preventive services where we help to guide the children and youth to develop positively and healthily into young adults. This is where our social workers, our youth workers work very closely with the children and youth on a regular basis to make sure that we provide the guidance that they need. A key reason why we have been able to evolve and adapt to the changing landscape of children's needs is our financial independence. It is through the support of our donors and our funders that we have been able to pilot new services and programs wherever we see a gap in the landscape of Singapore without having to wait for the government to provide funding. And it is also because of this financial independence, because we have long since built up a department that has a team that has helped us in our fundraising efforts, that we are able to establish a research and advocacy department since 2003, so almost 18 years ago. So this department allows us to conduct research on issues around affecting children, youth, and families in Singapore. And to this end, we have been able to self-fund many research studies around topics such as child abuse and neglect, bullying, and resilience in children. We also have an advocacy team that leads our efforts in creating public awareness and advocating for changes at a systemic level. These are just some of the factors that have allowed us to contribute in a unique way to the landscape, to supporting children, youth, and families in Singapore. I shall now let my colleague Bee Joo continue to share on some of the challenges that we see as being presented to the well-being of our beneficiaries.
Thank you, Boon. Yeah. Hi, good evening, everyone. Right, since its establishment in 1952, Children's Society has continuously adapted our services to meet the changing needs of our beneficiaries. So over the years, we reach out to a large number of children and youth, as well as their families, through a wide spectrum of services, ranging from the protection and rehabilitation of children and young persons who have experienced abuse and neglect, providing guidance and nurturing children and young persons, supporting and strengthening families so that they can provide a positive family environment for their children. And as what Boon just mentioned, we also champion actively for the interests of children and young persons by raising public awareness on issues such as child abuse and neglect through our research and advocacy team. Yeah. So I'll take the next 10 minutes or so to touch on what are some of the challenges which Children's Society will be focusing to address over the next 5 years, followed by sharing our 8 service goals that we want to achieve over the next 5 years. Okay, the prevalence of long-term impact on adverse childhood experiences. So in Singapore, the number of child abuse and neglect cases investigated by Ministry of Social and Family Development has actually jumped almost threefold over the past 5 years. In 2019, over 1,000 child protection cases involving physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect were investigated. And close to about 1,200 children were placed in out-of-home care, including residential care as well as foster care. Well, this part of this increase in both suspected child abuse as well as subsequent placement of children in out-of-home care service may be attributed to greater awareness of the detection by the secondary caregivers. This trend still warrants our continuous attention. Next slide. So beyond child abuse and neglect, research has demonstrated that other adverse childhood experiences, in short we call them ACEs, ACES, such as living with domestic violence or substance abuse in their family households, could have long-term negative impact on the child. Such prolonged exposure to adversity can result in toxic stress, leading to poor mental and physical health in adulthood. So in one of our recent studies conducted with 270 children and their families from low-income families under our charge, we found out the following. 85.2% of children reported having experiences at least one ACEs, one adverse childhood experiences. And 46.3% of them reported experiencing 4 or more ACEs. And the studies also show that the children who experience more ACEs tend to have, number 1, poorer life satisfaction, number 2, poorer school engagement, and number 3, poorer social emotional competency. So these are the impact that ACEs will have on the children currently. And when they grow up in the adulthood, they will experience more mental and physical health issues. And these are some of the symptoms that we are observing in some of our adults clients that are coming to our centers for help. Yeah, next slide. So increase in stressor on families is another challenge that Children's Society aim to address over the next 5 years. So over the years, we have worked with many families with complex issues such as financial difficulties, incarceration of family members, domestic violence, just to name a few. The COVID-19 crisis has heightened the pressure on families, causing further strains in family relationship. As you can see from the slide, the reported number of offences related to family violence released by the Singapore Police Force jumped by about 22% in the month after circuit breaker measures kicked in. Okay, our Asian Family Service Center recorded an increase in the family violence cases from an average of 7 cases a month from October to December 2019 to an average of 14 cases, that's about double, 14 cases a month from the month of January to April in 2020. A majority of these cases involve violence against their spouses, followed by violence against their children and among siblings. The closure of schools during the circuit breaker period and the suspension of many community services due to safe distancing measures meant greater social isolation for our children and young person, many of whom have to spend more time at home with adults who are also struggling with the impact of the crisis. Thus, many a times these adults, the family members, are not able to provide the adequate support for the children who are facing stress and anxiety because of the changes that they are experiencing back then. We have also seen how the current COVID crisis disproportionately affected low-wage and gig economy workers and their families, many of whom are our clients back in our service centers. Families who could usually get by in normal times found themselves facing possible retrenchment and sudden drops in income and had to seek financial assistance for groceries, meals, and laptops for school-going children. while struggling with the lack of conducive environment at home for home-based learning. And we are talking about easily 7 to 8 family members having to stay in a 1 to 2 rooms rental flat during the during the circuit breaker period, which can be quite stressful for many of them, because for 1 room rental housing, if some of you are aware, there's no bedroom. You know, it's just a living hall and a small kitchen. And imagine 7 to 8 family members squeezing in that space and having to do home-based learning, having to work, etc., and not being able to go out during the CB period. Yeah. So we have seen a record number. So during this period, many of them have lost their employment and a sudden drop of income. So we have seen a record number of applications for financial assistance through our casework fund during the pandemic in 2020. So now we look at the mental health concerns among our children and youth. While there's no official statistics on the prevalence of mental health issues among our children and youth, the higher rates of suicide reported in recent years are definitely a source of concern. As you can see from the slides, a total of 94 people aged between 10 to 29 years old completed suicide. That means their attempt was successful in 2019. Amongst boys aged between 10 and 19, there were 19 suicides. The highest since record began in 1991 and almost tripled. This figure almost tripled as compared to the 7 cases recorded in 2017. So looking at the statistics, suicide of boys is about 20% of the 94 people who completed suicide in 2019, which is relatively high. We have observed an increase in the number of calls and chats related to mental health issues received by our Tinker Friend helpline and chat line. As some of you are aware, Children's Society run Tinker Friend is a helpline for primary school children since 1984. So in 2019, such calls and chats total to 109 calls, while in the first 8 months of 2020, during the pandemic time, it had reached 264, more than twice as many. Okay, next. Next, we look at the risks associated with the digital world. So as we know, our children, and sometimes even adults ourselves, our children and young person are spending more time in the digital world, not only for learning, but for leisure, such as gaming, connecting with their peers, as well as, whether we like it or not, meeting strangers who might have a greater influence over them than their friends and families. So research has shown that adolescents are more likely to participate in risky behaviors and less likely to be able to control their initial impulses, and are more susceptible to peer pressure, especially when they are behind the screen and when they can remain anonymous. Spending long hours online has also hindered their physical communication skills and has caused them to be less capable of resolving conflicts appropriately. For instance, our practitioners at the front line have noticed that the children and young person that they interact with are increasingly taking to social media platforms to express themselves and ventilate their feelings. And because of the safety of hiding behind the screen, these children and young person tend to be more open in ventilating their feelings, which could cause more misunderstanding and conflicts between them and their peers, which would then subsequently lead to more tension and stress. And that's where affect their mental wellness and coming to our practitioners for help. Yeah. We also see more young people participating in unsafe activities online, such as the Blue Whale Challenge, if some of you have heard of it, which is an online suicide game targeting at teenagers. So the digital world, the online, the internet can be, have its pros, but it definitely have its cons, as we agree. So what can we do about it? So next, I'll be touching on, the goals set by Children's Society that we set to achieve over the next 5 years. There are altogether 8 service goals we have set for ourselves. I'll be touching on the first 5, while Boon will be touching on the last 3. Okay. As you can see from the slides, from the, I think the green, yes, starting from the green pie. Goal number 1, children and youth will strive to and be resilient despite the impact of adverse childhood experiences. Though our service centers and through our service centers and residential homes, Children's Society addresses safety and well-being concerns of the low to moderate risk child protection cases. So we provide intervention for the caregivers, work closely with multiple stakeholders to support the well-being of the children and young person under our charge. Where possible, we aim to reunify the children with their family of origin. So how are we going to achieve these goals? Over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to be more intentional in providing trauma-informed care throughout our agency practice. This entails developing our knowledge and skills in trauma-related issues. We aim to scale up our in-house psychological service to provide assessment for general mental health needs of our children and young person. We also target to start the adoption facilitation services to ensure that our children and young person permanency needs are met through the stable and enduring adoption placements. Because we see some in the past, we running the children's home, we see many of the children, they grow up in the home, but yet at the end of the day, some of them find it difficult because of the family circumstances. It doesn't allow them to be reunified with their families. So Children's Society has started this adoption facilitation service to ensure that potential children and young person ensure a permanent placement. Adoption. Yeah. So goals number 2, regardless of their background, all children will have equal opportunity to realize their potential. We provide families with resources and opportunities to stimulate their children's social, emotional, and cognitive development. We believe in the early years. We believe the early years of child's life are the key to healthy development. Education and play can stimulate the cognitive, social, and emotional growth of a child. However, not all families have the means and resources to provide these fundamental needs for the children. So we work closely with ECDA, Early Childhood Development Agency, as well as MOE to reach out to families whose children have yet to be enrolled in preschools, primary schools, or face school attendance issues. So how do we aim to reach these goals over the next 3 to 5 years? We aspire to work with parents and educators to support the holistic development of the children and young person at community level, as well as to take part in national projects such as Kidstarts program, where we work with parents of young children right from as young as when the children are in the mother's womb. So this national project helps to identify expecting mothers from the low-income household. They need to meet certain criteria, and we start to work with the mothers on parenting, how to care for the children, educating their children, etc. All the way till children reaches primary school age. Yeah. So goals number 3, as they move into adulthood, youth will develop positively into responsible and healthy young adults. So in Children's Society, we run various youth drop-in centers to provide safe space in schools and within the community for youth to engage in activities they enjoy, such as sports, cooking, dancing, online games, etc. In the process, we hope to build their confidence, competence, and character. So by youth coming together, they gain a sense of connectedness and learn to care and contribute to their communities. We also see that, with the relationship being built over time, youth tends to be more forthcoming and open up when they face challenges, whether it's with their peers or issues that they are facing at home. Yeah. So with the COVID-19 pandemic and safe management measures in place, we find ourselves having to engage youth through social medias and other digital platforms in order to continue reaching out to them. So over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to ramp up our efforts in virtual engagement. We talk about the digital world, right? So we want to ramp up our efforts in virtual engagement with the youth that we serve. Be more intentional in our engagement with youth by being more sensitive to issues related to mental wellness so that we can identify early signs of distress and provide the necessary support. We also want to capitalize on the good rapport our staff members have with the youth and conduct casework and counseling with them who require in-depth, with those who require in-depth work within the safe space. The fourth goal, children and youth who are in contact with the legal system will be accorded due process, their need will be met and their voices heard. Being in contact with the legal system due to an offending or risky behavior, or they are witness of a crime, can be very distressing, especially for children and young persons who lack full awareness of their rights within the legal system. We work closely with the ministries and the state courts to support children and young persons who are in contact with the law and or are required to attend court, either as a witness, a victim, or an alleged offender. To support them, to ensure that they are to provide the support in times of distress when they have to give evidence in court, or when they are being supporting the police in the process of investigation. Right, so how do we do, what do we do over the next 3 to 5 years to achieve these goals? We want to raise awareness and educate stakeholders on existing policies and processes and the possible implications on children and young persons and their families. This is to encourage sensible and appropriate referrals to for available intervention when necessary. We also want to advocate for a child-friendly approach in handling children and young persons in contact with the law, such that their interests are given primary consideration. Lastly, we also want to support children and young person offenders, as well as youth at risk and in risk within the community through both formal and informal diversionary programs provided by our colleagues doing the ISP program, which is a funded program by the Ministry of Community, Families and Ministry of Socials and Families Development. Yeah. Okay, goals number 5, caregivers will be resilient and empowered to manage current and future challenges so that their children and youth are able to grow and develop in a positive environment. So we have been talking about issues faced by children and young person, but this particular goal, our focus is on the caregiver. So why is this so important, right? Because we all know that children's and young person's issue do not exist alone, and more often than not, the adult's caregiver could be facing a wide range of issues such as relationship issues, marital issues, financial difficulties, family violence, experiencing trauma, drugs-related issue, employment issue, incarceration, just to name a few. And these adults, when faced with these issues, are stressed, and they are often overly stretched such that their parenting capacity could be compromised. Hence, to effectively help the young person, the children and young person, there's a need for us to provide support to the adult's caregiver to increase their caregiving and parenting capacity and to build a strong and stable family environment. So what do we hope to achieve over the next 3 to 5 years? We aim to resolve immediate family issues. Besides that, we want to focus on stabilizing the adult's caregiver on a longer term basis with the focus on promoting their mental well-being, self-management, as well as emotional regulation skills. This is because we see many of the caregivers, when they are stressed with their own issues, they tend to vent their frustrations on the little ones at home, and this is not helpful. So I think before we can help the children and youth, we need to stabilize the adults, work on their well-being. This is what we aim to do. And of course, besides that, we hope to enhance parenting capacity through training programs, support groups for caregivers, as well as matching them with appropriate volunteers to provide the continuous support, as well as seeing them for casework and counseling. Okay, I'll leave Boon to share with us the 3 other goals.
So finally, if I come to these 3 goals, these 3 goals are more around our research and advocacy work. Perhaps most of you will be quite familiar, or you might have heard of many centers providing direct services. I think the first 5 goals that Bee Joo described are largely what we call direct services. But not many people are also aware that Children's Society have a research and advocacy team. And just now, I think we mentioned already some of the ongoing research studies like bullying, resilience, and even the most recent study on corporal punishment. For us to understand how parents perceive corporal punishment and how often they use it in the disciplinary method, especially when research has shown that corporal punishment tend to have negative outcomes on the long-term development of the child. In terms of advocacy, our unit has also been leading the charge, and we see that in the next few years, it is quite important for us to be able to highlight some of the issues, some of the systemic structural gaps that we see in the society today that affect a wide range of beneficiaries, not just Children's Society's beneficiaries, but also the beneficiaries and clients of other agencies in Singapore. So finally, if I can just spend just one minute explaining what this means about the goal in green, about giving opportunities to children and youth to voice their views and to contribute to issues concerning their futures. I think as adults, we are always quite keen to jump in with a lot of solutions on how and what our children and youth need, how do we help them resolve their problems, but more often than not, actually the children and youth need a listening ear. So starting even from our youth drop-in centers, this is a center where we encourage the youth to come by after school, and we give them a say in what kind of programs, what kind of facilities they want to see at the center. Apart from that, we are also starting a new platform where we invite children and youth to participate actively by responding and giving us their feedback and comments on issues that concern them, even on matters such as COVID-19, PSLE, and how the combination of schools, integration of schools may affect them moving forward. So this is where we hope to be different. This is where we hope that we will be able to act as an effective bridge between the children and youth and the adults, so that we are able to present the voices of children and youth before the adult decision makers make their decisions. So with that, I come to the end of our talk. Thank you very much for having us this evening. We'll be very happy to take any questions from the group if there are.
Yes, perhaps I can start off with the first question. We have Children's Society. We also have like organizations like SOS. So how do you all work together to have a more holistic approach to dealing with stress for children and even adults and families?
Okay, so if I can start, so SOS actually provide a helpline to children and adults, so they don't distinguish between the beneficiaries they serve. And we have been also tapping on their expertise by attending some of the training programs that they conduct, particularly just now on the issue that Bee Joo mentioned on suicide prevention, for instance, on helping us to be able to be in a better position to spot signs of suicide and to be able to convince the child to change their mind when they decide to make a suicide attempt. So there could be an overlap, like you said, but actually we go through a different approach because our target audience is children. So we go to schools, we promote Think a Friend, whereas SOS might be more focused on serving the adults or serving the older children. So that is where we see that because there is a gap in serving the younger children, that is why we've decided to also come in with Think a Friend, this Think a Friend service that we open up to all primary school children. It's free. In the past, it was only a phone line, and I think in recent years, we decided to make it a chat line, and it's obviously becoming more popular now because children also find that they have less privacy because their families are all at home. So that's why we have also seen a larger jump in the number of chats compared to the number of phone calls that we've received.
Yeah, just to add on, we definitely refer many of our clients, especially the caregivers that we are supporting at the Family Service Center site, to SOS helpline, because SOS helpline, they run 24/7, right? So for our centers, we are closed after office hours, although sometimes, at times when we assess the risks are high for some of our clients, we do contact them over the weekends to ensure their safety. We'll put in the necessary safety plans for those who have higher suicidal thoughts, but we also provide the SOS helpline for them in the event that they need someone to talk to when they cannot reach their social workers or counselors. SOS helpline comes in very handy.
Shall I take some of the questions on the chat?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I think there is a question. Can you advise what families or children income group are part of the various programs? Please let me know if I didn't interpret this question correctly. We largely serve children and families from the low income group, but it doesn't mean that only children from the lower income group have problems. So I think maybe if I can just spotlight one of the programs that we run, where we come in to help parents resolve some of the conflicts with their children, where parents basically tell us, that they have reached an impossible situation with their children, and they expect the court sometimes to come in and maybe even consider putting their children away in boys' home or girls' home. So what surprised us is, in this program, it doesn't mean that only children from low-income families have problems. Parents who seem to be relatively well supported financially also have problems with their children. So even though the majority of our children and youth are from lower income groups, we don't exclude the other income groups, children from the other income groups from joining our services. Okay, I see another question. What are the resilience steps taken by SCS during this new normal? What are the observations? I think one of the changes that we have had to make very quickly, I remember in early 2020 when the COVID-19 situation first erupted, we had to provide a lot of digital devices to the children and youth that we work with, because it was taken, it took them by surprise. So many of them did not have electronic devices. And right now, even because of frequent changes in the health alerts, we've been well trained, and I think our beneficiaries too have been well trained to conduct, to engage with us virtually. So I think this is a change that we expect to see. And of course, engagement through virtual means will never be as effective as face-to-face engagement. It's difficult to sit a child down. It's difficult to sit a youth down in front of a screen. So while we are sort of accepting such an engagement, we're also hoping that the measures will be relaxed soon enough for us to continue some of our services face-to-face.
So, to add to that, what are your initial observation from these kids, right? Because the resilience is one of the major tasks, right? What's right now the children are facing. What are the first initial observations for them to adapt to the new normal, right? Because coming back from them, that is one of the aspects what we see right now we are moving towards a mental wellness program also, right? And what have you observed from it? What are your output from it? What are the steps to be taken for the future for these kids?
Okay, so if I just focus on the children and youth and what changes we've seen, actually what we've also realized is during this period where we see a lot of, I think also recently because of the incident, because of the River Valley, there was a school incident that happened in Singapore. We see a lot of news in the press that teachers, school counselors are all stepping up to provide services. And yet we notice that there could be groups of youth who are less inclined to speak to the teachers, who are less inclined to speak to the counselors. And this is where we actively use social media to reach out to them, to encourage them to speak to our staff. So, the nature of the youth drop-in centers that we operate are meant to be more casual, more informal. So we encourage children and youth to come to us in a non-judgmental space. And we realize that they are actually more open to speaking up about some of the issues, some of the problems they face when they know that they can trust our social workers and youth workers with confidentiality. But of course, if there are issues regarding safety, then we have to go back to the schools, we have to work with the parents. So we started youth drop-in centers in the early 2000s, but yet we find that actually this service is still very relevant today, even more so today, actually, with all the stresses that the children and youth are facing in the families and in schools. We believe that this provides a new space, a different space for them to be able to seek help, not just from peers, also from adults, the social workers and the counselors at our centers.
Yeah, thank you, Boon.
Thank you. I think there was a question about the boys who committed suicide. I don't know, Bee Joo, if you want to take that question.
Yeah, 19 boys. So a question from Leonard. 19 boys committed suicide. I think that's from the statistics from one of our slides. So yes, the answer is statistics shows that male in general tend to attempt suicide more than females, and this is across countries. Yeah, you have 4 boys. I have 2, Leonard. But I think be positive. I mean, as parents, as long as I think like what Boon say, I think just like how we operate youth service drop-in centers, we have to build that relationship. So likewise as parents with our teenagers, with our children. Yeah.
Yeah, can't agree more. Right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I come in with a question, please? The Rotary Club has a group called the Interact Club, which is for basically teenagers. And during the recent leadership training course that we organized, a lot of the clubs came out with the suggestion that they would like to take up mental illness as a feature of their programs. Now, they want to work with each other, spot possible situations which could develop into more serious situations. Now, if something like this is handled by them, would the Children's Society be able to come in and work with them or advise them on aspects of mental illness and suicide prevention, etc.? And could the Rotary Club work with you and the Interact clubs on this aspect?
Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. I think we are very well aware of the Interact Club. I think maybe some of us could have been.
I'm sure you are.
But I think we definitely know them from our school years. So we are very, very happy to work with. We also have our own platform. As I mentioned earlier, we're also trying to hear views from the younger population of the population. So we will be very happy with them, and then we can see how we can contribute together.
Okay.
And it's really easier for students to think of ways to engage and improve mental well-being than just adults putting our heads together. So
good. We'll suggest it to the Interact clubs that they have an avenue to get more information from Children's Society.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. Thank you very much. Sorry, thank you very much for what you've said. I would just like to. I suffered from mental illness as a child. At the age of 11, I was diagnosed with childhood depression, and that was in 1988. You know, and at that time, childhood depression or psychiatry was very low key. So has there been like an increase in like child suicide going forward, or was it more in the 80s, 90s, a higher prevalence because there wasn't as much known about child psychiatry? Yeah, thanks.
I can't comment on that because, okay, like I mentioned earlier, at least for Singapore, they only start to record the number of suicides in 1991. That was about 30 years ago. right? So if you're talking about the 80s,
Yeah, yeah.
we really don't have the stats. But definitely, I mean, as a social worker, what I have been observing.
Well, this I'm talking.
Sorry?
This is like the late 1980s. So it was 88. So like 1990 would be about. Okay, if we look back at like 91 compared to 30 years ago, yeah, to 2021 is because yeah. Sorry. Anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, I remember recently attending a talk, a sharing by our in-house clinical psychologist. He was sharing with us the trend that was recorded in Singapore, the suicidal trends. There's definitely a rise over the years.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think COVID doesn't really help very much. I think it actually, as you mentioned in your talk, that it's it's impacted negatively on it as well. It's just added an extra dimension into it.
I think I just like to mention that the statistics that was shown is the successful suicide cases, and there are many unsuccessful attempts, but they are real attempts. So at the centers, we see many children and youth attempting self-harm. Some could be just, I mean, if I may say, just cutting themselves, not serious, but if these are not addressed, because it is, what is the root cause of them doing self-harm? If they are not addressed in time to come, they might try other attempts, other form of self-harming, which could be dangerous. Yeah.
Well, I'm a pure example of that. Like going forward into my adulthood. I've attempted a few times. Due to things that have happened in my childhood. You mentioned a few of the things. I could identify with that quite a bit. So yeah. So definitely what happens in childhood actually goes into adulthood.
Yes.
And if it isn't addressed in childhood, it actually messes you up in adulthood, and that's what I've experienced myself.
Yes. I think that's also the reason why. I think that's also the reason why one of our service goals is to work with the caregivers, because we see that, the caregivers themselves, they were many of them were victims of adverse childhood experiences themselves, and because it was not treated when they were young, the impact just follow them, and when they become a parents, they have difficulties parenting their children. So that's where.
Well, I don't have any children, but yeah, I've seen it through my family, through my dad and my grandfather. My grandfather not being a proper dad, not teaching my dad how to be a proper dad, and so I've seen that. So there's a long history of that childhood neglect. From my grandfather to my dad. I call it neglect because he wasn't a real dad to my dad. So yeah, and the impact that goes with it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Rupert, that was very brave of you to share, and it was meaningful for us to go through that exchange. Appreciate your candor and sharing your vulnerability. Appreciate that. And I think we as we are moving past time, I think any further Q&A we can take as we do the fellowship after the meeting, and I will pass it back to the president now for the follow-ups.
Thank you very much. Well done.
So first of all, I would like to say that this is an important topic, and one in which the Rotary Club has to play a bigger part in partnership with Children's Society or SOS or other organizations. It is such a painful thing to see young people losing their lives when they can be saved, and which is why some years ago when we helped to raise funds for SOS to research into suicide prevention, I thought that was really good. So we have to keep out of it. Before I ask our Rotarian Jazz to give a vote of thanks, perhaps I may like to ask HNPV Ko Chun Hui whether he would like to say a few words. or maybe share with us this passion about being in the Children's Society for so many decades.
Please unmute. Ask him to unmute. Unmute yourself, HM.
PP Ko Chun Hui, would you like to unmute yourself?
Only can ask him to unmute. He's still muted.
Maybe press the space bar.
The button next to the stop video.
How do we press your red button, the microphone?
Oh dear. Sorry to put HMPB Ko Chun Hui to such inconvenience. So I suppose we will hear from PP Ko Chun Hui maybe after Jess give her vote of thanks. Jasper, over to you.
Thank you, President Louis. All right. Obviously, this topic is one that is touching many hearts here, because looking at the questions itself, it seems that quite a number of you are very interested in this topic. Yeah, and this is something that's happening right now, today. Just for the information of new members, I am in the schools. Okay, so I'm directly involved in some of the things that have been mentioned earlier on. Indeed, I think this is very timely for us to have Ms. Ang, right, Boon Min, and Ms. Tan, sorry, am I saying rightly? Ms. Ang, Boon Min, and Ms. Tan Bee Joo, to have them with us today, because I think their session is very important for us, especially for parents who are listening in and you're worried about your 4 boys. And I have 3 boys, so you can also imagine the situation, and I have many students in the school. These are indeed, I think, as mentioned, challenging times. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated some of these problems, and I think Bee Joo and Boon Min are facing more challenges at your end, right? And I think we are very grateful that we have such an organization as the Singapore Children's Society to look into the needs of not only the children, the youth, very important also, and families. I thought this part is very critical, because if the family is dysfunctional, you can imagine what's happening in the home front. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm sure there will be more questions coming your way, right? And we hope to have some collaboration with the Interact Club and the Singapore Children's Society. Right, on behalf of Rotary Club of Singapore, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Okay,
Luis,
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I believe PP Ko Chun Hui can speak now.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the club for inviting Boon Min as well as Bee Joo to share with our fellow Rotarians the work of Singapore Children's Society. Actually, I just like all fellow Rotarians to know that Children's Society's association with Rotary Club went back many years. At the beginning of her speech, Boon Min mentioned about our convalescent home in Changi, and Rotary Club of Singapore actually made a donation of $20,000 for us to start that home. Personally, I became a member of Rotary Club I had the honor of becoming a member of a club in 1974, and it was in 1975 that I joined the Singapore Children's Society as a volunteer, and has been with the society since. What I want to share is the Children's Society's approach to social work is quite different from
I think Chun Hui has got hung.
Frozen, you're frozen.
Frozen.
Yeah, should we try again?
You're frozen.
Maybe you have to switch off the video. Okay, we have to thank HMPP Ko Chun Hui another time. We'll probably ask him to send us a synopsis, and then we can circulate among members about his journey with the Singapore Children's Society. And now that leaves me again to thank all the speakers, both of them, giving us their time despite their important work to do in helping to save children and families. So we would like to ask that if our speakers can remain behind for a short while if time permits, and then when we close the meeting, people who have questions to still ask maybe for a few more minutes. Okay, for now, what I'll do is the most enjoyable part, call the close of the meeting, right? Right? Sorry? Oh, yes, that's right. Before we close, I would like to give you a heads up about what's going to happen next week and who we're going to invite to speak to us. Okay. So next week, we will have Mr. Ling Ting Ming, founder and CEO of Act 4 Technology Group and OTSAW Digital Inc. And he will be talking to us about humanity and AI. Wow, humanity and AI. Sounds like it doesn't come together, but it does. So let's hear from him. Come prepared with your questions after you do some Google search on what is humanity in collaboration with AI. So look forward to seeing you all next week. I'll call close to the meeting. Stay back if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.